September 19, 1944. Arracourt, eastern France. Hauptmann Klaus Werner peered through the vision slit of his Panther Ausf. Watching the rolling farmland east of Nancy through sheets of autumn rain. His crew had been briefed to expect American M4 Shermans, reliable but outgunned tanks that German crews called Ronsons because they lit up like cigarette lighters when hit. What emerged instead from the morning fog, grinding through the muddy fields with a mechanical confidence that made Werner's stomach tighten, would shatter every assumption the Panzerwaffe had held about American armored doctrine since Operation Overlord began. 5 American tanks with profiles he'd never seen before were advancing in a disciplined wedge formation. And they weren't retreating from his company's 18 Panthers. For Hauptmann Werner and the 462 German tank crewmen of the 113th Panzer Brigade who engaged American forces around Arracourt between September 18 and 29, 1944, the collision between expectation and reality would unfold across 11 days of mechanized combat that military historians would later call the greatest tank battle on the Western Front. Among the most shocking encounters was the engagement on September 19, when 5 tanks from the newly arrived American force, machines German intelligence had barely documented, faced off against elements of Werner's company in what should have been a textbook German victory. According to after-action reports from the U.S. 4th Armored Division, preserved at the National Archives in College Park, Maryland, the first substantial deployment of M26 Pershing heavy tanks in combat conditions occurred during the Lorraine Campaign of autumn 1944. German military intelligence officers had prepared extensive tactical assessments of American armor based on encounters with M4 Shermans throughout Normandy and the pursuit across France. The 240-page tactical manual Merkblatt 47-1E, Der Amerikanische Kampfpanzer Sherman und seine Bekämpfung, dedicated 37 pages to the Sherman's vulnerabilities and recommended engagement tactics. What German intelligence files contained about American heavy tank development was fragmentary at best, catastrophically incomplete at worst. Oberleutnant Friedrich Steinmetz, gunnery officer in the 2nd Company, 113th Panzer Brigade, recorded in his combat diary, now housed at the Bundesarchiv Militararchiv in Freiburg, his first encounter with American heavy armor, September 19, 08:47 hours. Spotted 5 enemy tanks advancing along the Basange-La Petite Road. Profile unfamiliar. Turret configuration different from Sherman. Commander ordered engagement at 1,200 meters. Our first round struck the lead tank's glacis plate at optimal angle. No penetration. The American tank continued advancing as if we had thrown stones. This should not be possible. The psychological preparation German tankers received throughout 1943 and 1944 had conditioned them to expect American material quantity to compensate for qualitative inferiority. Training documents recovered from German armored schools at Paderborn and captured in March 1945, translated by Allied intelligence and catalogued as SHAF/G2/2847, described American tank doctrine in specific terms. According to these documents, American tanks were mechanically reliable but inadequately armored and undergunned for modern armored warfare. American crews were described as technically proficient but lacking in aggressive spirit and tactical flexibility characteristic of German panzer tradition. Most critically, German doctrine assumed numerical superiority would be Americans' primary advantage. They would compensate for inferior machines with overwhelming numbers and industrial production capacity. Yet here stood Hauptmann Werner, age 31, veteran of Kursk in the retreat from Ukraine, watching 5 American tanks, just 5, advance through concentrated fire from a company-strength German position without hesitation, without the expected American caution, without breaking formation. The cognitive dissonance wasn't merely tactical. It was architecturally destabilizing to everything German armor doctrine had taught since 1942. Feldwebel Martin Richter, Panther commander in 3rd Platoon, described the engagement in a letter to his brother that was intercepted by Allied postal censors and preserved in the Eisenhower Presidential Library. The Americans have brought something new to the field. We hit one of their heavy tanks 4 times, 4 direct hits from 800 meters with our 75mm KWK-42. The best anti-tank gun in the world. The shells bounced off like pebbles off a castle wall. Then their return fire came. One shot. Just one. It penetrated Lieutenant Becker's Panther through the front glacis, something we were told was nearly impossible for any Allied tank gun. Becker and his crew had no chance. The American tank pivoted like it was performing a training exercise and engaged Schreiber's tank. Another single shot. Another penetration. 2 Panthers destroyed in less than 90 seconds. This is not the American armor we trained to fight. The revelation of American engineering evolution. The shock of superior American armor came in cascading waves, each more psychologically jarring than the last. According to combat records from the 4th Armored Division, preserved in the division's operational history compiled by the Army's Historical Division in 1945, the engagement at Arracourt marked a turning point in German perceptions of American industrial and tactical capability. Major Robert Harmon, operations officer for Combat Command A, maintained detailed tactical logs that were later donated to the Patton Museum at Fort Knox. His entry from September 19, 1944 provides the American perspective: engaged enemy armor positions east of Arracourt with mixed force including 5 M26 Pershings. German response: typical, aggressive advance attempting to exploit presumed American armor inferiority. Pershing gun performance exceeded expectations. The 90mm M3 gun penetrated Panther front armor at ranges the Germans clearly did not anticipate. Enemy formation broke after losing 6 tanks in initial exchange. Prisoners expressed genuine shock that American tanks could match or exceed Panther protection and firepower. The technical specifications told their own story of American industrial evolution. The Panther Ausf. Germany's premier medium tank by late 1944, mounted the excellent 75mm KWK-42L/70 gun with a muzzle velocity of 925 meters per second, capable of penetrating 140mm of armor at 1,000 meters. Its frontal armor measured 80mm at 55 degrees, among the best protection available to any tank in 1944. The M26 Pershing mounted the 90mm M3 gun with a muzzle velocity of 853 meters per second, capable of penetrating 150mm of armor at 1,000 meters. Its frontal armor measured 102mm at varying angles. On paper, the two tanks were roughly equivalent, the Pershing slightly better protected, the Panther slightly more mobile. But specifications don't capture battlefield performance. The Pershing's gun stabilizer, superior optics, and ergonomic turret design gave American crews faster target acquisition and engagement capability. The tank's reliability, a product of American automotive engineering expertise, meant Pershings spent more time operational and less time awaiting repair. Lieutenant Hans Vogel, captured after his Panther was disabled on September 22, described the realization in an interrogation transcript preserved in NARA Record Group 165. We were taught that American tanks were mechanically simple but crude. That American crews relied on numbers rather than skill. At Arracourt, we learned these beliefs were dangerously obsolete. Their new heavy tank is not crude, it is sophisticated. Their crews are not unskilled, they are well-trained and aggressive. We came to Arracourt expecting to face what we fought in Normandy. Instead, we encountered an American army that had evolved while we were still preparing to fight the last battle. The material reality of industrial capacity. But superior individual tanks represented only the most visible layer of revelation. Beneath it lay something more fundamentally challenging to German strategic assumptions: American industrial capacity to not merely match German quality, but to do so while maintaining overwhelming quantitative superiority. The Wehrmacht's tactical doctrine since 1941 had rationalized German material deficiencies with qualitative arguments. Yes, the Soviets produced more tanks, but German panzers were superior. Yes, the Americans landed enormous forces in France, but German tactical excellence would compensate. This framework allowed German commanders to maintain confidence despite deteriorating strategic circumstances. Arracourt demolished this comforting narrative. The Americans weren't just bringing vast numbers of adequate tanks. They were bringing smaller numbers of superior tanks while still maintaining their numerical advantage in standard armor. They had achieved both quality and quantity, something German war planning had assumed was economically impossible for any nation to sustain. Hauptmann Werner's combat diary, recovered after his capture on September 25, reveals the progressive realization: September 19, encountered new American heavy tank. Excellent protection and firepower. Likely experimental. September 21, 3 more of the new tanks appeared. Not experimental, organized deployment. September 23, intelligence briefing confirms Americans are fielding these machines in increasing numbers while continuing Sherman production. How is this possible? Our factories struggle to produce enough Panthers and Tigers. The Americans produce both superior heavy tanks and adequate medium tanks in quantities we cannot match. The strategic implications are terrifying. The production figures support Werner's growing horror. By September 1944, German factories were producing approximately 300 to 350 Panther tanks monthly, representing a substantial portion of Germany's armored fighting vehicle output. American factories in the same period were producing over 1,000 M4 Shermans monthly while simultaneously beginning Pershing production and continuing to manufacture tank destroyers, self-propelled artillery, and other armored vehicles. Underofficer George Hoffman, a Panther driver captured on September 24, expressed the psychological impact in a letter intercepted and filed in Allied intelligence records: "I served in a tank factory before being conscripted. I understand production. What the Americans have achieved defies everything I learned about industrial capacity. They produce vast quantities of adequate machines while simultaneously developing and fielding superior machines. Our propaganda told us American industry was inefficient, that mass production meant poor quality. At Arracourt, I saw the lie. They can experiment, fail, iterate, and succeed because their industrial base is so enormous that even their failures don't compromise their overall capability. We cannot afford to fail. Every design must succeed. Every tank must count. They can absorb losses and mistakes we cannot." The tactical doctrine revelation. Material superiority, however shocking, was something German commanders could rationalize. What proved more fundamentally disturbing was the revelation of evolved American tactical doctrine that contradicted years of Wehrmacht assumptions about American military culture. German tactical analysis had characterized American commanders as cautious, methodical, and doctrine-bound, officers who followed manuals rather than exercising battlefield initiative. This assessment wasn't entirely unfounded. Early American operations in North Africa and Italy had sometimes displayed the stiffness of an army learning modern warfare. At Arracourt, German forces encountered American armor operating with aggressive confidence, tactical flexibility, and sophisticated combined arms integration that matched or exceeded German capabilities. The Americans weren't fighting like the hesitant force that had struggled at Kasserine Pass. They were fighting like veterans who had internalized lessons and evolved. Oberleutnant Steinmetz's diary captures the cognitive dissonance. September 20, American armor operations today showed sophisticated understanding of terrain exploitation and mutual support. They coordinated artillery fire with armor advances in ways that suggest excellent communication and planning. When we attempted our standard counter-penetration tactics, they anticipated and countered effectively. These are not the Americans we fought last year. Either they have learned extraordinarily quickly, or our intelligence assessments were fundamentally flawed from the beginning. The American approach at Arracourt demonstrated systematic advantages German forces could no longer match. American forward observers coordinated artillery support with unprecedented speed. American mechanized infantry worked in close coordination with armor. American radio communications allowed real-time coordination that German forces struggled to replicate. Hauptmann Werner observed this integration: the Americans fight as a system, not as individual units. Their artillery responds within minutes, ours takes hours. Their commanders adapt with speed that suggests excellent communication and well-trained initiative. We were taught American doctrine was rigid. What I observed was the opposite. American commanders demonstrated tactical flexibility equal to our own, supported by material advantages and coordination we cannot match. By September 25, 1944, the 113th Panzer Brigade had been effectively destroyed as a combat formation. After-action reports from the U.S. 4th Armored Division documented the outcome with brutal clarity. German forces committed approximately 262 tanks and assault guns to the engagement. American forces destroyed or captured 281 German armored vehicles, more than initially committed, because reinforcements were fed into a deteriorating situation. American losses during the same period: 25 tanks destroyed, 46 damaged but recoverable. The exchange ratio of more than 11-to-1 shocked both sides, though for different reasons. Feldwebel Richter's letters document the psychological deterioration. September 20th, lost 2 more Panthers. Crews shaken but maintaining discipline. September 22nd, Schaefer's crew abandoned their operational Panther after taking a single hit. This is not cowardice, this is the result of discovering everything we believed was false. When men learn their equipment is not superior, their tactics are not decisive, and their intelligence was fundamentally flawed, they lose confidence in command decisions. Hauptmann Werner's final diary entry before capture reveals the complete psychological collapse. We came to Arracourt with 18 Panthers, the best tanks Germany has produced. We were confident. Our crews were experienced. Our tactics were proven. Instead, we were annihilated. Not by overwhelming numbers alone. We were annihilated because the Americans brought better tanks than we expected, better crews than we anticipated, and coordination we thought them incapable of achieving. Every assumption about American material inferiority has proven catastrophically false. Of 18 Panthers, 3 remain operational. 15 are destroyed or abandoned. If we were this fundamentally wrong about American armor, what else have we been wrong about? This question haunts me more than captivity. A soldier can accept battlefield defeat. What destroys morale is discovering the defeat was inevitable, that everything you believed was false, and that your commanders either lied or were incompetent. Either conclusion is unbearable. For Hauptmann Klaus Werner and the surviving crews of the 113th Panzer Brigade, the revelation at Arracourt was complete. But the full implications of what German tankers had learned about American industrial capacity, tactical evolution, and the systematic advantages democratic societies could bring to total war, had yet to fully manifest. September 28, 1944. Allied Interrogation Center, Toul, France. Hauptmann Klaus Werner sat across from Captain Thomas Bradford of the U.S. Army Intelligence, his wrists unbound, a cup of real coffee steaming on the wooden table between them. After 9 days of combat that had destroyed his unit and shattered his understanding of American military capability, Werner now faced something more psychologically disorienting than the battlefield, a systematic dismantling of every assumption he'd held about why Germany was losing the war. For the 147 German tank crewmen captured during the Arracourt engagement and processed through Allied interrogation facilities in eastern France during late September 1944, the revelations that began on the battlefield would deepen into something far more profound. What they discovered through observation, conversation, and careful questioning would expose not merely American tactical superiority, but fundamental differences in how democratic and authoritarian societies organized for total war. According to declassified records from the Office of Strategic Services, preserved in Record Group 226 at the National Archives, Allied interrogators in autumn 1944 noticed a consistent pattern among German prisoners captured in France after September. Unlike earlier prisoners who maintained ideological rigidity or sullen silence, these men asked questions. They wanted to understand how they had been so comprehensively defeated by an enemy they'd been taught to view as militarily inferior. Captain Bradford's interrogation notes from September 28, 1944, housed at the U.S. Army Heritage and Education Center in Carlisle, Pennsylvania, record Werner's first questions. Subject appeared physically healthy but psychologically disoriented. First question was not about his fate or repatriation, but about American tank production. Specifically, how do you produce both the Sherman and the Pershings simultaneously? Our intelligence told us you lacked the industrial capacity for multiple heavy development programs. When I explained that American industry operated multiple parallel development programs as standard practice, subject became agitated. He stated, "That should be impossible. No nation has such surplus capacity." The industrial philosophy revelation. The first layer of deeper understanding came through exposure to American industrial organization, a system so fundamentally different from German war production that captured tankers struggled to comprehend its basic principles. German war industry operated under centralized control with severe resource constraints. Each design decision involved trade-offs. Developing the Panther meant reducing Tiger production. Improving one weapons system required sacrificing another. The entire German industrial apparatus functioned under constant scarcity, of raw materials, of skilled labor, of manufacturing capacity, of time. American industry operated under entirely different principles. According to War Production Board documents preserved at the Franklin D. Roosevelt Presidential Library, American war production in 1944 simultaneously pursued 17 major armored vehicle development programs while maintaining full production of existing designs. The industrial capacity existed to experiment, fail, restart, and succeed without compromising ongoing production. Lieutenant Hans Vogel, the Panther commander captured on September 22, encountered this reality during a work detail at a U.S. Army supply depot on October 3. His account, recorded in a letter to his wife that was intercepted by censors and preserved in NARA Record Group 389, reveals the psychological impact. "Today we unloaded supply trucks at an American depot. Anna, I cannot describe the abundance. Spare parts for tanks stacked like cordwood. Entire replacement engines in crates. The Americans discard components we would repair and reuse 3 times. An American sergeant told me they scrap tank engines after 500 hours of operation and install new ones. 500 hours. Our Panthers are lucky to receive major maintenance once. The Americans treat tanks like Americans treat everything, as abundant, replaceable, improvable." Underofficer George Hoffman, the former tank factory worker, grasped this distinction during conversations with American guards in early October. His diary entry from October 7, preserved in the Bundesarchiv, articulates the realization. "Spoke today with an American corporal named Jensen who worked in an automobile factory before the war. He explained that American tanks use standardized components across multiple vehicle types. The same engine that powers a Sherman can power trucks, tank destroyers, other vehicles. When Americans design a new tank, they don't start from nothing, they adapt existing proven components. We do the opposite. Each new German tank is a complete redesign. The Panther shares almost nothing with the Panzer IV. Every new design requires new supply chains, new training, new everything. American standardization seems boring, unimaginative. But it means they can produce faster, repair faster, adapt faster. Our pursuit of engineering perfection has made us inflexible." The second profound revelation came through observation of American military command culture, a system that empowered junior officers and NCOs in ways that contradicted German hierarchical tradition. Wehrmacht doctrine emphasized centralized command with detailed orders flowing down from senior officers. Junior officers executed orders with limited flexibility. Initiative was valued, but within strict hierarchical bounds. This system had worked brilliantly during Germany's early war successes when German forces held material and tactical advantages. At Arracourt, German prisoners observed American forces operating under radically different principles. American tank commanders at platoon and company level made tactical decisions that would have required battalion or regimental approval in German forces. American NCOs adapted to changing battlefield conditions without waiting for orders from higher command. Oberleutnant Friedrich Steinmetz, the gunnery officer whose diary had documented the initial shock of Arracourt, spent 2 weeks observing American operations from a POW holding area near the front lines. His entry from October 12 reveals growing understanding. "Watched American Tank Company conduct training exercises today. What struck me was not their equipment but their command style. The company commander gave the mission objective, allocated resources, and let platoon leaders determine execution. Each level had freedom to adapt to circumstances. When one platoon encountered unexpected obstacles, they adjusted without radioing for permission. In our forces, such initiative without approval would risk disciplinary action. The third layer of profound discovery involved information flow and how American forces processed intelligence, adapted to new information, and disseminated lessons learned. German military intelligence in 1944 operated under severe constraints. Information flowed upward through hierarchical channels, was analyzed at high levels, and disseminated downward as formal doctrine, a process that took weeks or months. By the time tactical lessons reached frontline units, battlefield conditions had often changed. American forces operated with radically different information systems. After-action reports flowed rapidly through multiple channels. Tactical innovations developed by individual units were documented, analyzed, and disseminated theater-wide within days. The result was an army that learned and adapted with unprecedented speed. Feldwebel Martin Richter observed this system during a conversation with his American Guard, Sergeant William Harrison, on October 15. Richter's account, recorded in a diary entry, Sergeant Harrison mentioned that lessons from Arracourt have already been incorporated into tank training in England and the United States. Already. The battle ended 2 weeks ago, and American tank crews on other fronts are learning from what happened. Harrison showed me a tactical bulletin, just 8 pages, simple language, specific lessons. In our army, such analysis would take months and result in a 100-page manual that no one reads. Americans produce simple documents that actual soldiers can use, and they do it while the battle smoke is still clearing. This rapid learning cycle extended beyond tactics to technology. American forces at Arracourt immediately reported Pershing performance data. According to War Department records, these field reports reached engineers at Aberdeen proving ground within 72 hours. Design modifications were implemented in tanks still on production lines. Hauptmann Werner grasped the strategic implications during a conversation with Captain Bradford on October 18. I asked how quickly American industry could improve the Pershing based on combat experience. Bradford said modifications identified today could appear in production tanks within 6 to 8 weeks. 6 to 8 weeks. When we identify problems with the Panther, fixes take 6 to 8 months if they happen at all. Americans improve while fighting. We improve between defeats. The morale and motivation revelation. The final profound revelation involves soldier morale and motivation, why American soldiers fought effectively despite lacking the ideological indoctrination German soldiers received. Wehrmacht training emphasized ideological commitment, martial spirit, and willingness to sacrifice for the fatherland. German soldiers were taught that their cause was righteous, their victory inevitable, their enemies inferior. At Arracourt, German prisoners encountered American soldiers who fought effectively without apparent ideological fervor. American soldiers complained about conditions, questioned orders, expressed desire to go home, behaviors that would indicate poor morale in German forces. Yet these same Americans fought with skill and determination that achieved decisive victory. Feldwebel Richter struggled to understand this contradiction. His diary entry from October 25 captures the confusion. American soldiers are strange. They grumble constantly about everything, the food, the weather, their officers. They show none of the martial spirit we were taught to value. Yet they fight well. How do they do this? I asked Sergeant Harrison. He laughed and said complaining is how Americans cope. He said American soldiers fight not because they love war, but because they want to finish the war and go home. They fight to end fighting. We fight because we were told our cause is glorious. They fight because they want their cause to be finished. Perhaps fighting to go home is more sustainable than fighting for glory. The American approach to soldier welfare reinforced this pragmatic motivation. American forces provided better food, medical care, rest rotation, and mail service than German forces could manage. These material comforts weren't luxuries, they were calculated investments in combat effectiveness. The final understanding. By early November 1944, as German prisoners at Arracourt were transferred to permanent POW camps, the transformation in their understanding was complete. They had arrived expecting to face the Americans of propaganda, materialistic, weak, poorly led. They had encountered instead a military machine that combined material abundance with tactical sophistication, industrial efficiency with rapid adaptation. Hauptmann Werner's final letter before transfer, dated November 3, 1944, summarized the transformation. I came to Arracourt believing German tactical excellence would defeat American numbers. I learned that Americans have achieved both quality and quantity while maintaining flexibility we lack. I believed American soldiers were soft, that democracy made them weak. I learned that democracy gives them initiative our rigid hierarchy cannot match. I believed our total mobilization gave us advantages. I learned that American industrial surplus creates strategic flexibility we cannot achieve. Most painfully, I learned that everything we were told about American weakness was false. Our intelligence was catastrophically flawed. Our assumptions were dangerously wrong. A soldier can endure battlefield defeat. What destroys the spirit is discovering that defeat was inevitable, that the advantages you believed you held never existed, and that the enemy you were taught to despise is superior in every measurable way. The Americans defeated us through systematic advantages in every aspect of warfare: production, logistics, training, command, adaptation. We lost to a system, not to a battle. And systems cannot be defeated by courage alone. The 147 German tankers captured at Arracourt would return to a destroyed Germany carrying forbidden knowledge about why they lost. Their transformation hadn't come through propaganda, but through observable truths that demolished indoctrination. At Arracourt, 5 American tanks defeated dozens of Panthers. But the real defeat was deeper: the systematic destruction of German assumptions about American capability and the advantages democratic societies could mobilize for total war. That proved to be the most devastating weapon of all.